Regional airlines say they have stepped back from the brink after being thrown a $30 million lifeline from the government. The loans are intended to alleviate financial pressure on the smaller carriers, which have been struggling with soaring costs, including from rising regulatory fees. Sounds Air, for example, which I brought up in the last hour, has been forced to cut several regional routes over the past year. Also to address costs. The sector says there are more than 600 flights per week operated by regional airlines, and these services have gone decades without any government support, despite similar subsidies being standard overseas. Funding has been approved also for upgrades that will allow passengers to fly with both smaller airlines and the major carriers on a single itinerary. South Island Minister and Associate Transport Minister James Meager has responsibility for the aviation sector and stressed this support is not a bailout. And he joins me now. James, good afternoon.
Hi, Leah. Coming to you from sunny Marlborough today.
Oh, the sun's shining. Nice. Is it windy? We've had terrible wind.
It is not. I don't have a drop of wind here, which is typical for the South Island. It's always beautiful weather here.
Yeah, well, you have to say that. But it is a beautiful, beautiful place. Minister, I know the regional airlines have been in discussions with the government for quite some time now. And for some, maybe this has come a bit too late. Why has it taken so long for support to come?
Look, we're very aware of the challenges that the airlines are facing. And at the same time, we have to be incredibly careful with taxpayer money. So you've got a government which cannot afford at the moment to just spray money around. So it does take a lot of time when we're going to make these significant contributions to make sure we're getting it right. We think we are getting this one right. This is something that the sector has asked for, you're right, quite a while. And when I came into this role in January, having met with the airlines and the Airports Association, it was one of their top priorities. They said this is probably the one thing you could do to get us through, because ultimately the solution to this is going to be growing our passenger numbers, getting a bigger market, more demand, and having more passengers fly through. That's going to solve probably most of the problems. Some of the costs we can bring down too, but if we can buy ourselves some time, I think it's worth doing.
Because I've spoken with Andrew Crawford from Sounds Air quite a few times, and he said passenger numbers were not a problem. He said they had seen huge. He said they were lining up to get on his planes. It was just the cost that they couldn't sustain.
Yeah, and Andrew is probably right for his business and maybe a few other businesses out there too.
Yeah.
One of the challenges with passenger numbers is that they are how we are funding our regulator. And when we don't have enough passengers, the regulator's fees go up to cover those costs. So some of the costs that Andrew gets faced with are quite rightly his concern is that the government puts on additional costs for him. So if we can get our passenger numbers up, we can spread those base costs over a wider number of passengers. We can reduce levies, and hopefully that makes it easier for him to operate. So I guess there is a little bit of that in there as well.
How important are the regional routes to Kiwis, James?
I think they're incredibly important, and it's not just those people who are wanting to go, fly from Westport to Wellington for a holiday, let's say. It's actually really important for people who want to do business, and it's really important for people who need to access healthcare. We know that our regions are already at a disadvantage, despite the fact that they are our big producers, where we are isolated sometimes. We are separated from a lot of services that you might get in the big cities. So it's important that they stay connected. And to be honest, it's been probably my biggest priority since coming into this portfolio. As a backbench MP from Timaru, I knew the challenge of regional connectivity, and so I've tried to tackle it as well as I can over the past few months.
Are you able to tell us what the terms and conditions on repayment of the loans are?
That'll be up to the individual airlines when they work with Kānoa. So we've ring-fenced the funding to say if you are a small regional airline and you've got a regional route that you can secure or even potentially grow or fill in, and you need some concessionary loans to help with that, we're open to the terms and conditions that make that happen. And I'm actually in town tomorrow morning. I'll have a catch up with Andrew Crawford and talk him through some of the ways that we can make sure we get some of those contracts signed really quickly, because the last thing we want is to be here in 6 months' time with money not having actually been spent. So we want to get that out the door. We want to get the terms and conditions signed off. We want to make it as easy as possible for these airlines to take advantage of these loans so that we can get people flying.
Have any of the airlines already indicated to you which routes will either be restored or potentially not axed as a result of having this facility?
Not specifically. I think they're probably all taking the time over the weekend to figure out what this means for them, what funding support they can access, and whether or not it will be the difference between maintaining or picking up a route. I know that the likes of Origin have stepped in and picked up routes before, and that might be something that they look at. I know that Andrew, it sounds, we're looking at having to sell planes in order to cover some of their financing costs. Now, this support might mean they no longer have to do that, and that might mean that they have planes available to fly those routes. So I'm ultimately leaving those decisions for them, and I'm very happy to have conversations with them about talking positively about what routes can be picked up.
You mentioned the government this government is very aware of the taxpayers' money, unlike the previous. Are there any protections around taxpayer money if an airline is liquidated?
Yeah, so that'll all be wrapped into the terms and conditions of the contracts that they sign. My expectation would be that, well, obviously there are much smarter people that do this stuff for a living than I do, but my expectation would be that we secure, some sort of security or guarantee over assets, perhaps, and that the Crown is protected, because ultimately we're not here to bail out particular airlines. We're actually concerned about the security of the routes. And so we think that the loan system helps provide that. We actually have a lot of confidence that with a little bit of support, these airlines can be really successful. They are, by and large, really, really successful. If you look at the challenges that they face and the service they provide, they are really quite confident operators. We'll do our bit about the costs that we put on them, and the availability of pilots and engineers, and what other infrastructure support we can put in there. And with that, I'm confident that we can actually have a thriving aviation sector.
You've also announced a facility upgrade allowing passengers to fly with both smaller airlines and the major carriers on a single itinerary. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's called interlining. And if you've ever flown overseas, well, I think for some smaller airlines and consumers in particular, it will be a bit of a game changer, because if you have ever flown internationally, you'll buy a ticket, maybe say from, Christchurch to London, I don't know where you might be going, and you end up going on 2 or 3 different planes. Now that's one ticket, one purchase point. That doesn't happen domestically, so we're going to help support a system where if you're flying from Westport to Auckland, you might be getting your Origin flight to Wellington, then you might be getting a New Zealand flight to Auckland, and it'll all be on one ticket, one route. That provides, simplicity and ease for the consumer, but it also means that your ticket is protected the whole way. And we just think it's a really sensible and overdue change. It was actually in line to come through pre-COVID, but of course we all know what happened with COVID in the airline sector, and it's kind of fallen away. So if we can give that a little bit of a boost, I think that'll be a positive change for consumers.
Because, couldn't you simply have directed the larger airlines to facilitate the interline arrangement? Then, as it seems, that would have been win-win for everyone.